I've always wanted a metal lathe. Every time I'm working on something, there's a shim or a bearing or a part or a holder or something where I can envision in my mind what I want it to look like, and then trying to make the stuff I've got on hand or that I can find in the hardware store fit. It's never an ideal solution, or rarely the solution I was looking for. So I've always kept my eye on metal lathes, and I've always wanted one, but they've always been very pricey. I've had a lot of wood lathes. There's a Wen wood lathe behind me over there. I had an old Shopsmith lathe that I made some cool things with, including a threaded box, which I've got over on the other side I use for odds and ends. But always wanted a metal one, or metal lathe. So as the prices have slowly been coming down, I figured maybe it's time to get one of these things. This is not a top of the line lathe by any stretch of the imagination. So we're going to see just how rough this thing is. I haven't opened it up yet. With these inexpensive, little asterisk right there, relatively inexpensive metal lathes, you never quite know what's going to be in the box. And this is a Vevor one that I purchased on eBay, so it's even more questionable. It got here in about 2 days, which was really, really fast. It's heavy. It's about 120 pounds for that box. And getting it from the street down into my shop here and then up onto the bench here was interesting. I used my ceiling mounted winch. It's kind of up there. That thing is great. I wish it was on tracks because the pulley system that I rigged up to get this on the bench was interesting. But we've got that up there. And actually looking at my camera stand here as a case in point for being able to design parts that you need, I've got the camera mount for my stand here just taped to our post here, and that would be something we could turn relatively easily. Really curious what this looks like inside. So other than a quick peek, I haven't looked in here yet. So we'll look in at the same time. It's nice we've got some styrofoam. I think some other folks didn't have any. And I believe the lathe is actually screwed to the box. So we'll have to reach those screw points in some interesting way. We've got our toolbox inside. To see what's in there. And so far, just a real quick look. I don't see any gouges or any broken plywood, so it's a good thing. I can smell the oil. It smells a lot like Harbor Freight. So let me get the rest of these sides off and get this exposed, and then we'll take a closer look at this thing. The way this is attached to the carton, to the crate, is through the holes here. So we'll figure out a way to support it and then take those out. And those bolts go all the way through this large block here and then come out underneath. Last night and this morning came out and worked on the machine a little bit to get it more bolted down, set up, and configured. So far, about what I expected. Actually, a little bit better than I expected. You never know with these imported machines what kind of condition they're going to be when they get here. And they're almost like starter kits. And you know that there's going to be a lot of cleanup, a lot of tuning, a lot of kind of tweaking to make it work for your personal uses. And that was certainly the case with this one. Because when I got here, it was really grungy. There was a lot of oil, there's a lot of grit. You need to expect there's going to be dings and marks here and there. But after getting it all secured, bolted down firmly to the bench, it's not going anywhere, and everything works pretty well. Let's get this side off here and mention a few things that I noticed when it got here. The first being that this side was just kind of wobbling around. It wasn't really even attached to any great degree. And when it arrived, these gears were bone dry, so they were not happy. And you really need to goop these up with some thick grease. So these have all been greased up. Another thing is these bolts here that hold the housing on the outside. These were just flopping around. We were missing a nut on this side. So again, you always know there's a little bit of work involved with making these things functional. I thought I had in my stockpile of lathe tools a MT2 Jacobs chuck for putting drill bits so we can bore out some of the pieces that I plan on making, but I don't. So I've got one on order. And we've got about a 2.5 inch throw, between 2.5 and 3 inches, for our tailstock. And for the pieces that I'm working on, that really should be plenty. And then this just locks it down. So that'll lock down our tailstock, and then won't go anywhere. And as far as moving our tailstock back and forth, that's our lever there. We can move it out and lock that down. And as noted before, this is actually a little bit better than I expected. We've got a little bit of a nubbin here, a little bit of a point here. I'm still working on my shimming and using some of the tools that I've got because everything's on a little different height. This doesn't have as many adjustments as the more expensive machines have, so we'll figure out some way to have an adjustment here. We could replace this whole system if we want to with a better unit that would give us some more finer control. For the time being, I'm going to use the stuff I've got here, and we'll see what kind of stuff we can make with this. I want to also explore what kind of stuff we can make with pretty much the basic machine, because you can always add lots of dollars and get real fancy stuff, but I'm kind of interested in seeing what we can squeeze out of this. The total price for this was under $600. This was on eBay, and it got here in about 2 days. So for that price point, for the initial results I'm getting here, I really can't complain at this point. For our chuck, for our jaws, we can use them in this configuration. And it also came with jaws that we could use to put in that would hold bigger stock. So we'll play with that later on. In our little toolkit of oil, we've got lots of odds and ends here. It came with these blue carbide, really basic cutters, which I've used a little bit, but they are nothing to write home about. Not that I expected them to be spectacular. This unit did come with the metal gears. A lot of them come with the nylon ones, and I wanted to make sure we had the metal ones. So if we wanted to do threading on this, we've got a gear set here that we can set up underneath that cover, and we can pretty much pick not any thread count that we want, but a whole lot of them. What a lot of folks, of course, do, and I think it's simpler for cutting threads, is just use a tap and die set on this end rather than setting this up. If you have a lot of threads to cut, yes, it makes sense to set it up for that. If you don't, I think just doing it manually is a little bit easier. We've got our chuck here, our chuck key for that. Don't ever leave that in there, always keep that out. Here's some more of our jaws here. And a little oil bottle. And a couple screwdrivers and some wrenches. The destruction manual here is about what you'd expect. So I'll leave that there. There are better videos, better resources for how these things work than the manual, but that's no surprise there. As far as using the drive mechanism here, this works pretty well, and it gives a very nice finish. So for this finish on the inside of this little test piece here, instead of manually pulling this along, which you could certainly do, but it's not going to give you the most consistent pattern, consistent result. To use this, and again, for those that are used to all this, this is nothing new. But if we kick this on, so I'm looking forward to the projects with this. I've got lots of ideas, lots of parts, shims, pens, brackets, mounts, some really interesting things. Some boat-related stuff as well. Aluminum is a joy to cut. Brass is as well. We should be able to do steel on this. We'll just have to slow down our rates, slow down our aggressiveness, and take it really slow. But we really should be able to do steel and a little bit of stainless steel as well with the proper cutters, which opens up lots of options for boat parts and for cool things. So less than $600, got here in a couple of days, and I think the options are pretty cool. Stay tuned. Thanks very much for taking a look.